Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're not just opening a history book, we're launching a full-scale exploration into a moment when the ancient world was really on the cusp of an epic transformation. We're talking about ancient Rome and the towering figure who, perhaps more than any other, steered it from republic to empire, Gaius Julius Caesar.
A huge figure, yeah.
You sent us a fascinating stack of historical sources, from military commentaries to senatorial decrees, even personal accounts. Our mission today is to truly unpack these, to move beyond the legend and understand not just what happened, but how one man's ambition, brilliance, and, well, sheer audacity fundamentally reshaped the course of Western civilization.
It's a period absolutely overflowing with political intrigue, societal fault lines, and the kind of personal drama that honestly makes for incredible storytelling.
Right.
What's truly fascinating in our source material here is how it paints such a comprehensive picture of Caesar. He wasn't simply a military general or a politician. He was a master strategist operating within a Rome that was already grappling with profound identity crises.
Are you diving deep into the internal pressures that both allowed for his meteoric rise and, ironically, I suppose, led to the Republic's ultimate demise? It's really a story, a system pushed to its absolute breaking point, and the individual who saw both its vulnerabilities and maybe its potential.
Absolutely. And to truly understand Caesar, we first have to understand the stage he walked onto. So let's begin by setting that scene. What was Rome actually like in the 1st century BCE? Just before Caesar truly stepped into the spotlight, what were the underlying currents that made it ripe for such a transformative figure? The Roman Republic, a society on the brink. Historical context.
Well, Rome in the 1st century BCE it was a paradox.
Yeah.
On one hand, you've got the world's preeminent superpower, right?
Yeah.
A vast republic stretching from Spain to Asia Minor, absolutely rich with conquests.
Immense power. Immense. But on the other hand, its internal political balance was incredibly fragile, almost cracking under the weight of its own success. The core idea here is that Rome's traditional institutions, which were really designed for a smaller city-state, simply couldn't cope with the demands of this sprawling empire.
Right, they weren't built for that scale.
Exactly. We're looking at a system built on centuries of aristocratic dominance with a complex, often really tense interplay between the patrician-led Senate and the plebeian assemblies.
So the patricians, the nobles.
Yeah, the noble class, they held most of the power controlling governance, the key magistracies dictating policy. But the plebeians, the common people, despite being the vast majority, had pretty limited direct political rights. Their assemblies often found their decisions just overridden or undermined by the Senate.
Leading to tension, I imagine.
Oh, constant tension, simmering resentment. It was less a stable equilibrium and more a dynamic tension that frequently erupted into conflict, sometimes even violence.
So a system that was powerful externally but internally strained, almost like a massive engine with a fundamental design flaw. Beyond the political factions, how did the immense wealth from Rome's conquest actually impact the social fabric? What was the ripple effect on everyday Romans?
Yeah, this raises a critical question. How did such a powerful republic become so unstable at its very core? Our sources really highlight that Roman society, despite its immense wealth gained from centuries of wars and conquests, was experiencing rapidly growing income inequality. And this wasn't just a minor issue, it was a fundamental crack, a gaping chasm, really, in the social fabric. Imagine this huge gap between an incredibly wealthy aristocratic elite controlling most of the land, these vast estates worked by slaves, the resources pouring in from conquered territories,
Right.
and then an increasingly impoverished populace. Many of these common people were displaced farmers, there's small farms ruined by war or just bought out by large landowners, forcing them into the cities as landless laborers.
Creating a desperate urban population.
A desperate, swelling urban proletariat, exactly. These glaring disparities fueled increasing social conflicts between the impoverished populace and the aristocracy. The sources point to strong and pervasive demands for reform across society, like figures such as the Gracchi brothers a generation earlier, advocating for radical changes, land redistribution, debt relief, greater political representation for the common people.
These weren't just abstract ideas then.
Not at all. There were desperate cries from a population struggling to survive within a system that seemed designed to benefit only the few. And it's crucial to understand that Caesar emerged precisely during this period of significant social and political tension. His life and career were both a direct result of these conditions and a powerful catalyst for Rome's transformation.
So he didn't just ride the wave, he helped create it.
He actively leveraged it. In many ways, maybe even exacerbated these tensions to achieve his own ends, often presenting himself as the champion of the common people against the entrenched elite. The existing political structures, they just couldn't cope.
Fascinating. So he wasn't just a product of his time, he was also a driving force. The seeds of change were already there, but he cultivated them with a very specific kind of political genius. Now, let's delve into the man himself, starting with his origins. To Julius Caesar. Origins and early life.
Gaius Julius Caesar, born in 100 BCE, indeed hailed from the gens Julia, one of Rome's most ancient noble houses. But here's a crucial detail that's often overlooked.
Okay.
While they had the pedigree, the name, they had actually experienced a significant loss of political power and influence over a long period leading up to Caesar's birth.
Ah, so they weren't at the top anymore.
Exactly. This context is vital because it implies he didn't inherit an immediate path to the very pinnacle of Roman society, unlike, say, Pompey or Crassus, whose families were really at the height of their influence then. Caesar had to claw his way back.
Makes sense.
His mother, Aurelia, came from a highly respected, politically connected family. And this maternal influence would have provided not only a strong foundation of traditional Roman values and a rigorous education, but also those crucial social and political connections needed to navigate the, well, treacherous Roman landscape from an early age.
Just another was important.
Hugely. She was apparently a woman of formidable character, and her devotion to his education and early career played a much larger role than often acknowledged.
So he had the noble lineage, but he still had something to prove, right? A family legacy to reclaim. What kind of education would a young Roman aristocrat like Caesar receive? Our sources imply it was comprehensive, clearly preparing him for leadership, but also for survival in Rome's cutthroat politics.
Oh, it was meticulous. He received a traditional Roman aristocratic education designed to cultivate well-rounded leaders capable of governing Rome's vast empire. This included rigorous training in Latin, not just the language, but the language of law, politics, the art of persuasion.
Rhetoric was key, wasn't it?
Paramount. The ability to speak persuasively in the Senate, before the assemblies, or to address legions that was the bedrock of Roman political power. Caesar's eloquence became legendary, a skill honed from childhood.
And philosophy. Military tactics.
Yes, philosophy, which provided a framework for ethical and strategic thinking, often drawing from Greek traditions like Stoicism. And of course, military tactics, essential for any young noble aspiring to command. But our sources emphasize that the harsh political atmosphere of the late Republic, filled with civil unrest, violent political feuds, combined with his family's somewhat diminished standing, pushed him to be more than just an ordinary aristocrat.
So it forged him differently.
It suggests his education wasn't just about acquiring knowledge, but about developing resilience, cunning, strategic acumen, everything needed to not just regain his family's standing, but to completely surpass it. His early display of political ambition and a natural charisma, which just drew people to him, allowed him to rise quickly.
That drive.
Exactly. It's a hint at that extraordinary, almost relentless drive that would define his entire life. He understood from a remarkably young age that power in Rome wasn't just inherited. It had to be forged through intellect, persuasion, and a relentless willingness to challenge the status quo, even if it meant risking everything. 3. The early rung of the ladder, Caesar's political career.
So he's got the noble lineage with something to prove, the elite education, and this undeniable personal ambition. He's clearly not content to just rest on his ancient family name. How did he actually begin his methodical climb up Rome's notoriously cutthroat political ladder? What were his first significant roles that laid the groundwork?
Well, his political career officially began in 69 BCE as a quaestor. Now, while quaestor was Rome's entry-level magistracy, it was critical because it provided him with hands-on experience in financial affairs.
Managing the money.
Essentially, yes. Quaestors were the financial administrators managing public funds, supervising the treasury, overseeing accounts. This role would have given him a deep understanding of Rome's economic machinery, how resources were allocated, how the public purse worked, and where, potential vulnerabilities or opportunities lay.
And it wasn't just in Rome, was it?
No, crucially, our sources note it also involved duties in Rome's eastern provinces, specifically Spain. This wasn't just a bureaucratic posting, it immersed him in the practicalities of governing the empire beyond Italy. It allowed him to familiarize himself with different cultures, administrative challenges, the complexities of maintaining Roman authority far from the capital.
Broadening his perspective.
Hugely. This provincial experience would prove profoundly significant for his future military and political maneuvers.
Then he moved on to aedile in 65 BCE. This sounds like a role that put him squarely in the public eye, often involving a lot of spectacle and perhaps a bit of calculated extravagance. Was this a strategic move to build popular support?
Oh, absolutely a strategic move. In 65 BCE, he was elected aedile, and it was critical for gaining popular support. Aediles were responsible for public works, temple maintenance, and most famously, organizing public games and festivals.
The bread and circuses aspect.
Exactly. And during this period, Caesar organized truly lavish games. These spectacles, gladiatorial contests, theatrical performances, public banquets were incredibly expensive. Caesar himself incurred massive debts doing so.
Oh, massive debts.
Massive, but they were a direct, shrewd investment in popularity. By financing magnificent events, he directly appealed to the Roman populace who loved this stuff. This kind of PR effort was incredibly effective for gaining prestige and winning the fervent favor of the populace.
Showing off his generosity and competence.
Precisely. Our sources recount how his games surpass all others in splendor, generating immense goodwill. This vividly demonstrates his astute understanding of public perception early on and how to leverage it to build a formidable political base. It wasn't just entertainment, it was political messaging.
And then a religious role. Pontifex Maximus. This seems almost contradictory to the public spectacle of the aedileship, but clearly had immense political weight. What was the significance of that, especially given his seemingly secular ambitions and the massive debt he'd accumulated?
Well, in 63 BCE, just 2 years after his extravagant aedileship, he became Pontifex Maximus, the chief priest of the Roman state religion. And this wasn't merely a spiritual office. It significantly enhanced his political power and solidified his standing. It's a classic example of how religious authority and political power were deeply intertwined in Rome.
How so? What power did it give him?
The Pontifex Maximus oversaw state rituals, interpreted divine omens, managed the Roman calendar, all things with profound implications for public life and political decisions, especially in a society that believed the gods were directly involved. Holding this office lent Caesar an aura of divine favor and traditional legitimacy, even as he pursued more radical populist agendas.
So it gave him cover in a way.
And an unassailable position. It was a lifelong role, immune from direct political challenge. Our source also notes that in the same year, 63 BCE, he found himself amidst intense political rivalries, even opposing a prominent figure like Cicero during the Catilinarian conspiracy.
Right.
His election as Pontifex Maximus, despite his relative youth and his known debts, they say he was so deep in debt he needed a victory just to break even, was a testament to his growing influence and the effectiveness of his populist strategies. It was a strategic masterstroke.
So a careful, deliberate climb, leveraging every opportunity, financial admin, public spectacle, religious authority, to systematically acquire the tools of power and build an unshakable base. He was truly a master strategist from the very beginning.
Seeing every step as a means to a greater end, yeah. 4. Forging a general. Caesar's early military career.
Beyond politics, our source also highlights his early military experiences, which were just as formative, it seems, and crucial to his later success. Tell us about that.
Absolutely. Caesar's military career actually began quite young, serving in Rome's border regions. These were often tumultuous areas, constantly challenged by local rebellions or incursions, demanding practical, decisive leadership.
Like Spain again?
Specifically, yes, in 67 BCE, he served in Spain again. Here, he actively engaged in campaigns, strengthening Roman rule over local tribes. This wasn't a minor assignment. It involved actively engaging with and subjugating restive populations, establishing Roman authority, ensuring the stability of the province.
Real hands-on experience.
Fundamental, providing him with practical knowledge of military logistics, the immense challenges of campaigning in unfamiliar terrain, the complex dynamics of commanding diverse units. More than just fighting, it honed his strategic insights into managing conquered peoples, understanding their customs, pacifying restless regions through both force and diplomacy.
Skills you definitely need later.
Oh, absolutely. It was in these early commands he would have learned to assess enemies, implement siege tactics, maintain troop discipline under difficult conditions, often with limited resources. This hands-on experience, far from the theoretical lessons of his youth, was crucial for his future campaigns on a grander scale.
It sounds like he was accumulating a very well-rounded set of skills for a leader, not just politics and PR, but also the brutal realities of military command and provincial administration. He was truly building a comprehensive foundation for extraordinary power.
Mastering every facet of Roman leadership, yeah. V, the Unholy Alliance, the First Triumvirate, 60 BCE.
Okay, here's where Caesar really shows his political genius. Maybe not just working within the system, but creating a power structure outside it. Our sources talk about the formation of the First Triumvirate in 60 BCE. This wasn't a formal, legally recognized body, was it? So what was this alliance, and why was it so incredibly significant, given Rome's deeply traditional political structures?
You're absolutely right. It was explicitly not formal or legal. This alliance between Caesar, Pompeius, Magnus Pompey the Great, we know him as, and Marcus Licinius Crassus, was pivotal, yet informal. It was designed purely to circumvent traditional senatorial power.
To bypass the Senate.
Entirely. Rome's republican system was theoretically balanced, but in practice, the Senate, dominated by a conservative aristocracy, held immense, often obstructionist sway. They could block legislation, deny military commands, stifle ambitious individuals. The triumvirate was a private, secret agreement among these three incredibly powerful men, uniting their considerable resources and influence to bypass these roadblocks and achieve their individual goals.
Like a backroom deal on a massive scale.
Exactly. And what's truly insightful here is how this informal gang of three exposed the Republic's fatal flaw.
Yeah.
Its rigid, tradition-bound Senate could be utterly circumvented by overwhelming, coordinated personal power. It showed the Republic was more norms and conventions than an unbreakable system.
Wow.
It wasn't just a workaround, it was a blueprint for subversion, creating a new balance of power that operated entirely outside the constitutional framework. It really was a super pay of its time, but, with legions, vast fortunes, and a direct line to popular will.
So it was essentially a power grab, a concerted effort by three ambitious men to strong-arm the established order. Who exactly were these figures, and what specifically did each bring to the table that made this alliance so formidable and ultimately so dangerous to the Republic?
Each member brought a unique and indispensable element, creating an almost unstoppable force. Pompey represented immense military power and unparalleled prestige. He was the celebrated general of the era, with huge victories in the East.
The military hero.
Absolutely. His legions were fiercely loyal, his reputation immense, he commanded respect and, frankly, fear. Crassus, on the other hand, brought vast wealth.
The money man.
Arguably the wealthiest man in Rome. Made his fortune through fruit investments, real estate, maybe even less savory means during earlier proscriptions. This wealth allowed the triumvirate to fund campaigns, bribe voters, buy influence essential tools in Roman politics.
Okay, military power, money. What about Caesar?
And then Caesar contributed his burgeoning political ambition and that crucial popular support. He had cultivated a strong, almost fanatical following among the plebes through his aedileship and aggressive politics. He was charismatic, dynamic, willing to challenge the Senate head-on.
The popular champion.
Right. This combination, military might, limitless money, overwhelming popular backing, allowed them to effectively weaken the Senate-dominated structure and consolidate control. And during this period, Caesar was elected consul, one of the two highest offices, giving him a legitimate role to push the triumvirate's agenda from within.
So it wasn't just convenience.
No, it was a deliberate, calculated strategy to dismantle or at least bypass the established order and reshape politics to their advantage, a clear sign of the Republic's vulnerability. 6. The apex of ambition. The Gallic Wars, 58 to 50 BCE.
Now we come to what many consider the defining period of Caesar's military career, where his legend truly began, the Gallic Wars. This wasn't just a minor skirmish, was it? But an almost decade-long campaign that cemented his reputation as a military genius and the leader of unparalleled ambition. Can you paint a picture for us of what Gaul was like, geographically and politically, and what precisely prompted this massive undertaking?
The Gallic Wars undoubtedly represent the zenith of Caesar's military and political career.
Yeah.
Gaul, which today is modern-day France, Belgium, parts of Switzerland, surrounding areas, was a vast, diverse territory, not a unified state at all.
Lots of different tribes.
Exactly. Numerous independent Celtic tribes, Aedui, Arverni, Helvetii, Belgi, each with their own leaders, customs, internal rivalries. They often fought each other, but they also constantly posed a significant destabilizing threat to Rome's northern borders, particularly Cisalpine Gaul, the province right next to Italy.
So they were a security concern for Rome.
A security concern, yes, and a volatile factor. They had a history of raiding Roman territory. Caesar, fresh from his consulship and needing to maintain his military command and, let's be honest, expand his personal wealth and glory, saw an unparalleled opportunity here.
More than just defense, then.
Oh, much more. It was about expanding Roman influence, tapping into vast resources, and crucially, immensely enhancing his own military prestige and political standing back in Rome, far from the Senate's watchful eyes.
And Caesar's response then was not merely defensive, but a full-scale aggressive invasion aimed at total conquest and subjugation. How did he prosecute this war, and what made his military campaigns in Gaul so historically significant?
Precisely. In 58 BCE, Caesar, as proconsul, launched this major campaign aiming to bring Gaul entirely under Roman control. The first year, he prevents the migration of the Helvetii tribe, pushes them back decisively, showing his speed right from the start.
Swift action.
In subsequent years, crushing victories against other powerful tribes. He takes on the formidable Belgae in the north, overcomes the Veneti, a maritime people on the Atlantic coast, even developing special ships and tactics for them, drives out Germanic tribes crossing the Rhine,
Relentless.
and it all culminates in the pivotal Battle of Alesia in 52 BCE against a unified Gallic resistance led by Vercingetorix. Here, Caesar's engineering brilliance is just astounding. He builds this elaborate double circumvallation system.
Sieging the Gauls while defending against reinforcements.
Exactly. Besieging the main force while building a defensive ring around his own forces to fend off a massive Gallic relief army. It's a feat of audacious engineering and strategic genius still studied today. Vercingetorix surrenders, effectively ending organized Gallic resistance. These campaigns showed not just his strategic brilliance, but exceptional logistics, adaptability, and this profound capacity to inspire unwavering loyalty in his troops, even through years of brutal fighting. He was relentless.
He also famously wrote about these campaigns, right? His Commentary to Bello Gallico is still read today, not just by historians. Was that just a straightforward military report for the Senate, or was there a deeper, more personal, and perhaps political motive behind it?
Yeah, this raises an important question. What was the true purpose of his writings? Each year, Caesar meticulously recorded the wars in his Commentary de Bello Gallico, commentaries on the Gallic War. But this was far from a dry military report. It served as Caesar's exceptionally effective political propaganda.
Propaganda? How so?
Well, it was meticulously crafted to prove the legitimacy and justification of these wars to Rome, especially facing senatorial opposition questioning his prolonged command and the huge expense. He presented himself as the heroic defender of Roman interests, reacting to Gallic provocation.
Making himself the hero of the story.
Absolutely. Portraying his victories as essential for Rome's security and glory. He depicted the Gauls as savage and chaotic, justifying conquest as bringing order and civilization, neatly sidestepping the immense personal gain he accrued. It was a masterclass in shaping public opinion, burnishing his image, and subtly undermining rivals back home by showcasing his achievements.
Controlling the narrative.
He ensured his narrative was the dominant one, controlling how this monumental undertaking was perceived and celebrated in Rome, laying the groundwork for the eventual political confrontation.
So it was part military history, part autobiography, and a very clever political manifesto, all rolled into one. What were the broader long-term consequences of these grueling wars for Rome as a whole, and more specifically for Caesar personally, as he amassed this unprecedented power and reputation?
They had truly transformative long-term consequences. For Rome, they significantly expanded its borders to the Atlantic, incorporating vast new territories and peoples. This vastly increased Rome's economic and military might, new trade routes, immense resources, a huge pool of potential recruits. The scale was unprecedented for one commander.
And for Caesar himself?
For Caesar personally. It brought him an enormous, fiercely loyal army, forged through years of shared hardship and victory, utterly devoted to him, not the Republic. He gained invaluable military experience, perfecting his command, tactics, reputation, and perhaps most importantly, it brought him unparalleled, almost cult-like popularity among the Roman populace. They saw him as a victorious hero.
But that power was also a threat, wasn't it?
Exactly. This surge in personal power, military loyalty, and public affection would prove to be both his greatest asset and, simultaneously, the primary source of profound conflict within Rome. His rivals viewed his growing strength with immense alarm, setting the stage for the inevitable clash. 7. The die is cast. Return to Rome and the collapse of the Republic. 50 to 49 BCE.
After years of conquering Gaul, accumulating immense personal power, and forging this fiercely loyal army, Caesar found himself at a crossroads. As he approached Rome, our sources tell us the political atmosphere was incredibly tense, like a powder keg ready to ignite. What exactly was happening in Rome that led to such a volatile situation, pushing the Republic to its breaking point?
Well, the Senate, particularly the conservative faction, and Pompey, who, remember, was once Caesar's ally in the triumvirate, were now deeply concerned, honestly, terrified by Caesar's immense power and popularity from Gaul.
The triumvirate was long gone by then.
Oh, yeah. Crassus was dead, and Pompey, increasingly wary of Caesar's ambition, had aligned himself with the very conservative senators he once circumvented. They saw Caesar's continued command and his overwhelming public support as an existential threat to the Republic's institutions and their own entrenched power.
So they moved against him.
The Senate took a firm stance, demanding he disband his army and return to Rome as a private citizen. This was a direct challenge, an attempt to strip him of his military power, and a calculated move to make him vulnerable to prosecution for actions during his proconsulship.
They wanted to neutralize him.
They believed if they forced him to relinquish command and enter Rome unprotected, they could reassert senatorial control, maybe even put him on trial.
But Caesar didn't comply, did he? This is where one of the most famous moments in Roman history comes in. The crossing of the Rubicon River, famously marked by the phrase, Alea iacta est, the die is cast. What was the precise legal and symbolic significance of that act, and what were the immediate implications?
No, he absolutely did not comply. In 49 BCE, Caesar, leading just one legion initially, dramatically crossed the Rubicon River. This small river marked the sacred boundary between his province, Cisalpine Gaul, and Italia proper.
A legal boundary line.
Under centuries of Roman law, no general could cross this boundary with an army without the Senate's express permission. So this act was legally considered rebellion, treason against the Republic, a direct, blatant defiance of the Senate's authority.
And Alea iacta est.
The die is cast. It wasn't just a casual remark. It signified a definitive, irreversible decision had been made, with profound, unpredictable consequences. No turning back. By crossing, he committed himself to civil war against the Roman state.
Plunging Rome into civil war.
Correctly, setting Roman against Roman, marking an irrevocable point of no return for the Republic. And this raises that crucial question: was he justified? Protecting his dignitas, his honor and standing as he saw it, protecting the people against a corrupt Senate, or was it pure, unchecked ambition, a reckless gamble for absolute power?
What do the sources suggest?
Well, it's fascinating. Many in his legions and the populist faction saw him as a champion against an entrenched elite, his crossing a necessary act. But the conservative elite, like Cicero, saw it as the ultimate act of hubris, disregarding the laws meant to prevent tyranny. The insights suggest it was likely both a calculated risk for power and a desperate response to a genuine political deadlock and a threat to his survival. The lines were drawn. 8th, civil war and unprecedented victory.
So the Civil War erupted. The crossing of the Rubicon was the spark, and then the full conflagration began. How did Caesar navigate this incredibly destructive conflict, facing off against his former ally Pompey and the might of the traditional Republican forces across the vast Roman world? What was the outcome of this monumental struggle?
Once the Rubicon was crossed, there was no turning back. The Civil War saw Caesar's and Pompey's armies clash across the Roman world: Italy, Greece, North Africa, Spain. Caesar, known for his swift, decisive maneuvers, audacious strategies, and unwavering leadership, consistently outmaneuvered his opponents.
His Gallic veterans must have been key.
Absolutely. Seasoned veterans, fiercely loyal to him personally, incredibly effective, capable of feats of endurance that shocked their enemies. Caesar's ability to move his armies rapidly, force-marching them, striking unexpectedly, often caught Pompey's larger but maybe slower, less cohesive forces off guard.
He didn't win every battle, though, did he?
No, he famously pursued Pompey across the Adriatic, almost got trapped at Dyrrhachium, a tactical misstep he learned from quickly, but ultimately he achieved a decisive victory over Pompey at the Battle of Pharsalus in 48 BCE in central Greece.
The decisive moment.
Pretty much. It shattered Pompey's military challenge and his senatorial allies. Pompey himself fled to Egypt seeking refuge.
But he didn't find it there.
No, tragically assassinated by agents of the young pharaoh, Ptolemy XIII, who hoped to curry favor with the victorious Caesar. This eliminated Caesar's primary rival and the last significant military force standing in his way. The sheer speed and audacity of Caesar's campaign securing victory in just over a year was unprecedented.
And with Pompey gone, his forces dispersed, many senatorial allies defeated or in exile, what was Caesar's position in Rome upon his return? It sounds like he was now effectively the undisputed master of the Roman world.
Absolutely. Upon his return to Rome in 48 BCE, after securing victory and settling affairs in Egypt, including that politically strategic relationship with Cleopatra Caesar, effectively became the sole unchallenged ruler of the Republic.
The Senate was powerless.
The Civil War had decimated the ranks of the senatorial opposition. Those remaining were either cowed into submission or chose to align with him pragmatically or genuinely. The Senate's power was significantly diminished, reduced largely to rubber stamping Caesar's decrees, bestowing unprecedented honors upon him, often against their true will.
So the Republic was effectively over.
Caesar was clearly, undeniably on the path toward absolute dictatorship, consolidating all meaningful power in his own hands. This period marks the practical, if not yet formal, end of the Republican ideal. Even if institutions like the Senate still nominally existed, their substance checks and balances, shared power, independent action had been irrevocably broken. The long era of aristocratic rule through the Senate was, for all intents and purposes, over, replaced by the centralized personal power of one man.
The transition to empire was basically inevitable at that point.
It seemed less a question of if and more when and how, yes. Dictatorship and transformative reform.
After solidifying his grip on Rome, Caesar didn't just hold power, he declared himself dictator for life in 46 BCE, a title that surely sent shivers down the spine of any traditional Roman, given its connotations of temporary emergency rule. This was a radical political change, a clear break from Republican tradition, but he also immediately implemented extensive sweeping reforms. It's clear he wasn't just about consolidating power, he seemed to be genuinely trying to reshape Roman society. Can you walk us through some of the most impactful of these initiatives?
You're right. This was one of the most radical political shifts in Roman history.
Right.
The office of dictator was traditionally temporary, 6 months max for extreme crises. Dictator for life. Unprecedented. A stark signal the old republic was gone. But he didn't just seize power. He used it to enact widespread, profound changes. He showed a remarkably clear vision for Rome beyond just conquest.
You saw the Republic was failing.
He understood its structure was failing to govern the vast empire effectively. He sought to build a more stable, efficient, and, well, in his view, more equitable system, albeit one firmly under his absolute control.
So what were some key reforms? Let's start with legal and governmental changes.
Okay, first, legal and governmental reforms. He significantly expanded the Senate, increasing membership from maybe 300 to a staggering 900. This diluted the power of the old conservative families and brought in new members from Italy, even the provinces, many loyal to him.
Making it more representative, but also more loyal to him.
Both, yes. It aimed to make the Senate more representative of the broader Roman world, breaking the old nobility's stranglehold. He also actively tackled corruption, implementing strict measures against bribery and extortion in the provinces, long a source of instability. And he strengthened law enforcement throughout the Republic, aiming for greater order.
But also consolidating his control.
Definitely about solidifying centralized power, creating a more efficient government directly accountable to him, not a fragmented aristocracy.
So he was both expanding the elite, but simultaneously cracking down on their abuses, aiming for a more centralized system. And what about the widespread income inequality we discussed earlier? Did he specifically address that?
Absolutely. One of his most significant social initiatives was his land reforms, directly addressing that deep-seated inequality. He aimed to increase social justice by distributing land to the poor classes, particularly his veteran soldiers, a powerful, loyal group, but also to landless citizens.
How did he do that?
He established new colonies, not just in Italy, but overseas, settling tens of thousands of citizens and veterans in places like Carthage and Corinth. This was a direct response to the plight of the urban poor and displaced farmers, providing land and opportunity.
And securing loyalty at the same time.
Hugely popular with the plebs and his veterans, solidifying his support base and alleviating some of those chronic social tensions.
And he also extended Roman citizenship rights, which seems like a truly bold move, breaking with that very exclusive Roman tradition.
Yes, truly significant changes to citizenship rights. He granted Roman citizenship to communities outside Italy, notably, all free inhabitants of Cisalpine Gaul, northern Italy, and various communities in Spain and other provinces.
Transformative for integration.
Absolutely. Incorporating these territories more fully into the state. It expanded the tax base, provided more army recruits, fostered greater loyalty. It was forward-thinking, recognizing the evolving nature of the Roman state, laying groundwork for a more unified empire, albeit centered on Rome, though it definitely alienated many traditionalists. And beyond those broad reforms, he left a lasting impact on daily life with the Julian calendar. Implemented in 45 BCE based on the solar year, correcting the wildly inaccurate old lunar calendar.
Introducing the leap year.
Introduced the leap year concept. This calendar, with minor adjustments centuries later, is still the direct precursor to our modern calendar. It shows his foresight, his impact on practical daily life, his desire for efficiency and order.
And finally, he even restructured the city of Rome itself, demonstrating a focus on public welfare and infrastructure, almost like an urban planner.
Indeed. Urban planning and infrastructure. He initiated massive public works in Rome, restructured the city, seeking solutions to population growth, infrastructure issues, planned new public buildings like his Forum Iulium, improved sanitation, had ambitious plans to divert the Tiber, clear marshes, though many were unfinished.
So, more than just holding power.
Definitely. Actively trying to lay foundations for a new, more centrally governed, more efficient, and in his view, more just Roman state. A conqueror, yes, but also a builder, legislator, administrator, with a comprehensive vision. His reforms, while often serving his own power, undeniably addressed many deep-seated problems that had crippled the Republic. X, the man beyond the politics, personal life and relationships.
Our sources also delve into Caesar's personal life, suggesting it was as complex and strategically significant as his political career. He was known for his charm, his intellect, perhaps a certain daring in his private affairs. How did his relationship, especially with influential women, intersect with his political ambitions, maybe even contribute to his rise?
Oh, Caesar's private life was indeed as intricate and daring as his political career, often deeply interwoven with his public ambitions. His first wife, Cornelia, aristocratic but maybe less politically influential directly than later connections. Still, her lineage provided valuable social standing early on.
Okay.
His subsequent relationships with Pompeia, and most notably, of course, with Cleopatra, became significant parts of both his political and personal life. He showed a real willingness to leverage personal connections for strategic gain, blurring the lines.
He understood the power of alliances wherever they came from.
Whether forged on the battlefield or elsewhere, he understood alliances.
And speaking of Cleopatra, her name is almost as legendary as his. What was the specific practical significance of his relationship with the Egyptian queen, beyond just the romantic aspect? How did it impact Roman politics and his own power in a very tangible way?
Well, his relationship with Cleopatra was far more than a personal affair. It was a highly strategic, calculated alliance with profound geopolitical implications for Rome. It dramatically boosted Roman influence over Egypt, an incredibly wealthy and strategically vital kingdom.
Breadbasket of Rome, right?
Essentially, yeah. Egypt supplied vast quantities of grain to feed Rome's populace, and its immense treasury could finance Roman ventures on an unprecedented scale. By aligning with Cleopatra, supporting her claim against her brother, Caesar effectively brought Egypt under Rome's informal control without formally annexing it.
Securing food and funds.
Critical food supplies secured, a powerful financial ally gained, giving him an unparalleled strategic advantage over rivals. It also gave him a base in the East and immediate, unchallengeable wealth. It's a prime example of how personal connections, even romantic ones, were consistently leveraged for strategic, political, and economic gain.
Blurring private life and public policy.
It demonstrates his ruthless pragmatism and his exceptional ability to use every available tool, including personal charisma and alliances, to achieve his objectives and solidify his power. He saw opportunities where others saw only personal pleasure, turning passion into power. The Ides of March, assassination and aftermath, 44 BCE.
All this unprecedented power, all these transformative reforms, this vast influence stretching across the Mediterranean, and then on March 15th, 44 BCE, the Ides of March, it all came to an abrupt, violent, and utterly shocking end. It's one of history's most famous assassinations. What exactly happened on that fateful day, and who was behind this dramatic act?
On that fateful day, March 15th, 44 BCE, Caesar walked into a Senate meeting at the theater of Pompeii, apparently believing himself secure. There, he was brutally assassinated by a group of, estimates vary, maybe 60 to 80 senators, including figures like Marcus Junius Brutus and Gaius Cassius Longinus, the most famous conspirators.
Jabbed how many times?
The accounts say 23 times. Their motivation, from their perspective, was a desperate attempt to restore the Roman Republic, which they believed Caesar had fundamentally undermined.
By becoming dictator for life.
Exactly. By declaring himself dictator for life, concentrating all power, he had, in their eyes, become a tyrant, threatening Roman liberty and its traditions of shared power. They feared he would become a king, destroying the traditional system. They saw his death as the only way to save the Republic, an act of liberation.
So the assassination was intended to be an act of liberation, a desperate attempt to reset Rome to its republican ideals. But our sources indicate that it didn't save the Republic. In fact, it seems to have had the opposite effect, accelerating its downfall. How did this tragic miscalculation by the conspirators unfold?
Precisely. The assassination, meant to restore the Republic, instead plunged Rome into immediate chaos and, in the long term, ultimately hastened the definitive end of the Republic and accelerated the establishment of the Roman Empire. The conspirators, the liberators, fundamentally misjudged the mood of the Roman people,
Who largely saw Caesar as a hero.
largely admired him as a hero and benefactor, not a tyrant. They also gravely underestimated the profound power vacuum his death would create. Instead of a return to Senate power, Caesar's death sparked a new, even more brutal wave of civil wars.
As his allies sought power.
Primarily his loyal lieutenants like Mark Antony and his shrewd adopted heir Octavianus, they vied for control. The conspirators had no clear plan for what came next, and this raises that important question. Was his death inevitable due to his ambition, pushing things too far?
Or was it a miscalculation by his enemies?
A tragic miscalculation by those who feared him, an act that destroyed the very system they claimed to defend. It showed power could only be seized by force now, not constitutionally. Octavianus, his grandnephew and adopted son, skillfully navigated these turbulent times, eliminating rivals.
And became Augustus.
Through complex alliances and more conflicts, he emerged supreme, became Augustus, Rome's first emperor, formally ending the Republic and initiating the Principate of the imperial system. It's a powerful, chilling lesson in unintended consequences. An act meant to preserve a system provided the final push for its complete transformation. 12. Julius Caesar's enduring legacy.
So, looking back at everything we've covered today, from his challenging origins and calculated political climb, through the vast map-changing conquests of Gaul, his radical, transformative reforms as dictator, and the dramatic, chaotic aftermath of his assassination, how do we truly sum up Julius Caesar's immense historical and cultural legacy? He was clearly more than just a military and political leader. His influence seems to transcend his own lifetime.
He was a truly revolutionary figure, yeah. Not just in Roman culture, but in the very understanding of leadership and world history. His impact goes far beyond the immediate events of his life and continues to resonate. His military tactics, for example, still meticulously studied today at military academies worldwide.
His strategic genius.
His campaign planning, unparalleled speed of movement, innovative use of engineering, like at Alesia, his ability to maintain absolute loyalty, it set a new, almost impossible standard for military command. Not just a warrior, a brilliant strategist, an innovator. His political maneuvers were equally groundbreaking.
Understanding power differently.
He understood popular appeal, controlling information through propaganda like his commentaries, the necessity of building alliances outside traditional frameworks like the triumvirate to override a resistant establishment.
And then there are his literary works, which you mentioned earlier, the commentary. How do they contribute to his legacy beyond just being historical accounts?
Well, his literary works, Commentary de Bello Gallico and Bella Civili, aren't just dry documents, they're masterpieces of clear, concise Latin prose. They show his formidable intellect and his profound understanding of how narrative could shape perception and history way ahead of his time.
A guide for future leaders.
They served as a guide, not just in military strategy, but crucially in political communication and self-promotion, admired even today for their directness and sophisticated political agenda. His approach to state administration, too, those comprehensive reforms during his dictatorship.
Land redistribution, citizenship.
The widespread land redistribution, bold extension of citizenship, ambitious urban planning, they demonstrated a forward-thinking vision for a unified, more equitable Roman state. Genuine attempts to address deep-seated societal issues. While they undeniably served his power, they also laid vital groundwork for a more cohesive, efficient future empire.
Moving beyond the fragmented republic.
Exactly. He stands as one of the most critical figures, maybe the most critical, on the path from Rome's founding through the violent end of the Republic to the birth of the empire. His life is a crucial inflection point.
The republic couldn't cope anymore.
For all its ideals, it had become too unwieldy, too prone to internal strife, aristocratic deadlock, violence to govern an empire of Rome's size. Caesar, whether by design or by the force of his ambition and circumstance, provided the irresistible impetus for its transformation. This entire deep dive shows his complex personality, extraordinary leadership, transformative effects.
Shaping Rome and Western civilization.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Shaping Rome and consequently Western civilization itself. His actions created a blueprint for future emperors, profoundly influenced political thought on strong central governance versus republican ideals, a legacy still debated today.
What an incredible deep dive into the life and enduring impact of Julius Caesar. From his calculated political rise and the sheer breathtaking scale of the Gallic Wars to his radical systemic reforms as dictator and the dramatic, chaotic aftermath of his assassination, his story is a profound testament to how one individual's strategic brilliance, unyielding ambition, and willingness to challenge every norm can fundamentally alter the course of history. It's a powerful reminder that history is not just a sequence of events, but a dynamic narrative often shaped by the bold and sometimes tragic choices of its most powerful personalities.
He wasn't just a figure in a textbook. He was a dynamic force who understood and masterfully manipulated the complexities of his time, leaving an indelible mark. His story compels us to consider that often blurred line between ambition and tyranny, the effectiveness of a singular strong leader versus collective ideals, and the often unforeseen consequences of revolutionary acts.
So what does this all mean for you, our listener? As you reflect on Caesar's story, consider this. In what ways do leaders today, whether in politics, business, or other fields, still employ strategies or face challenges that echo those of Julius Caesar in his struggle to reshape a system? How do their personal lives intertwine with their public personas, influencing their power and legacy?
Good questions.
And what are the ultimate consequences for the institutions they lead when relentless ambition clashes with established norms, or when a system, much like the Roman Republic, is pushed to its absolute breaking point? It's a story that really challenges us to think about the nature of power itself. Thank you for joining us on the Deep Dive. We hope this extensive exploration of Julius Caesar has given you a shortcut to being well-informed and sparked even more curiosity about this pivotal figure. Until next time, keep exploring.